Hey everybody, welcome back to the vlog. Thank you so much for joining me. It is a beautiful Monday morning here in paradise. I'm in Florida. So, today I'm going to talk about Fujifilm, the X-T3 and the X-T2. Why? Because over the weekend I got a bunch of questions that basically said, Joe, which one should I buy? The X-T2 or the X-T3? What is a better buy? I have money in my hand. I want to go Fuji. Which is a better way to go? So today we're going to look at that. We're also going to take a look at some of the noise profiles between different cameras, which I thought was really, really cool. But stay tuned till the end of the video. We'll get into that a little bit. So let's start out with some boring stuff. And that is the specs. But before I do, I want to ask that if you haven't went over to my website, JCristina.com, please check it out. I got a lot of stuff that I've invented over the years that are photography based tools. Take a look at them. If there's something you need, pick it up and support me. That would be absolutely awesome. I would really appreciate it. And by the way, the last couple of weeks, I've been working on another project, which will be probably about 2 or 3 different products that I've put together that you guys, I think, will find interesting. That will be coming out in the next probably 10 days or so, hopefully. Anyways, I'm still hard at work. Now, getting right into the boring stuff here, which is the specs, right? So let's go through it. I'll try to go through it really quick, but we need that to just get an idea or a basis between the two cameras to make this decision that we need to make. So let's get right into it. The X-T3 sensor is an X-Trend 4 Samsung BSI sensor, most likely Samsung, whereas the X-T2 is an X-Trend 3 Sony sensor. Now, as far as the processor goes, we have a quad-core processor in the X-T3, whereas a dual-core in the X-T2. So that X-T3 is probably about 1.5 times faster than the X-T2 is. Now, megapixels. 26 megapixels on the X-T3 and 24 on the X-T2. The diopter has changed, whereas the diopter can be locked on the X-T3, so you don't mess around with it and all of a sudden things are blurry when they really aren't. Now, ISO. ISO on the X-T3 will go from 160 all the way up to 51,200, whereas the X-T2 will go from 200 ISO up to that 51,200 mark. Dynamic range. Now, the X-T3 supposedly has about, let's call it a half stop better dynamic range than the X-T2 does. Now, the back panel are nearly identical, but the X-T3 does have that touch sensitive back panel, whereas you can just touch the screen and dial in where your focus spot is in comparison with an X-T2 that doesn't have that functionality. Now, the EVF on the X-T3 is definitely better. We're looking at 3.7 million dots in comparison to the X-T2 that has 2.4 million dots of resolution. Now, as far as autofocus goes, the X-T3 has 4 times as many phase detection pixels as does the X-T2. And the X-T3 has those pixels spread across the entire sensor in comparison the X-T2 only has them in the center. Also, the face and eye tracking is 2 times faster with the X-T3, and that's because we have a little bit faster processor in the X-T3. Now, as far as burst speeds goes, the X-T3 will burst all the way up to 11 frames per second in mechanical shutter mode, whereas the X-T2 will only take you to 8 frames per second unless you buy that battery grip, whereas it will equal the X-T3 all the way up to 11 frames per second. Now, in electronic shutter mode, the X-T3 will hit 20 frames per second, but will go all the way up to 30 frames per second with a 1.25 crop, whereas the X-T2 will get you up to 14 frames per second, and that is it. Now, the features that are new to the X-T3 would include the pre-capture mode, you have sport finder mode, you have digital micro prism for manual focusing, and you also have night vision mode. To me, I think what is really cool is that digital micro prism because it changes the EVF into, let's say, an old school SLR viewfinder. It gives you an ability to really get that focus dead on. So I do like that a lot. Now, moving into video, the X-T3 will shoot all the way up to 4K at 60 frames per second, whereas the X-T2 will only get you to 30 frames per second. Also, 4K on the X-T3 will give you 400 megabits of a data stream in comparison to only 100 megabits with the X-T2. Now in 1080p, the X-T3 will get you 200 megabits of data, whereas you're looking at 100 megabits with the X-T2 in 1080p. Also, as far as your compression goes, you have IPB as well as all I on the X-T3, whereas in the X-T2, you only have IPB compression. Also, the codecs. You're looking at H.264 and H.265 on the X-T3, whereas the X-T2 will only give you H.264. Internal recording. 420 at 10-bit on the X-T3, whereas you're only getting 8-bit on the X-T2. And also with the external recording, you can get 422 10-bit on the X-T3, whereas the X-T2 will give you external recording at 422 at only 8-bit. Now, log. Both will give you F-log, but we now also have Eterna on the X-T3, which you do not have on the X-T2. And finally, the amount of recording time. This is very important for a lot of people like me that are doing video. Now, in the X-T3, it will allow you to shoot 30 minutes at 4K, whereas the X-T2 will only allow you 10-minute chunks at 4K, unless you have the battery grip, which will give you a little bit extra time. Now, also at 1080p, the X-T3 gives you 30 minutes, whereas the X-T2 will only give you 15 minutes, once again, unless you have a battery grip, which will extend that a little bit. So now, just like I alluded to at the beginning of this video, I went to this site called Photons to Photos. I'm going to leave a link in the comment area or in the description so you can go check it out. It's very cool. It's a site that allows you to take a look at noise, right? Read noise for different cameras. Now, bear in mind, let me put this caveat before I start showing you some of these frames. The caveat is simply this. The information that you're getting is raw data and it's not been weighted or adjusted from camera to gain and area that's being read. That being said, this is more for conversational sake, but it's kind of interesting what comes to play here. All right. So let me show you a couple of these frames. So now the first frame is between an X-T3 and an X-T2. All right. And as you can see here, they look very similar. They're almost identical. Now remember guys, noise is basically what is happening when you're adding ISO. As your ISO goes higher, just think about if you're an audio guy taking your amplification or taking your gain and turning that gain switch up. You're getting louder sound, right? Or you're getting more light, but you're introducing a lot of white noise on the audio side or white noise, I guess, on the video or on the photo side also. So as you turn that gain knob up and you get higher ISO, you're getting more noise. And that's what this is showing you, a noise profile. Now, if you look at this, like I said, they look identical. But what I find interesting is the X-T2 has a little bit less noise than the X-T3. Bear in mind with these charts, the lower the number is, the better it is. The less noisy the sensor is at different ISO ranges. So as you can see here from the baseline up to about, let's say 640 ISO, they're almost identical. But once they hit 800 ISO, the X-T2 is actually better with noise. Bear in mind, you're talking about a different sensor altogether, number one. And number two, you got an extra 2 megapixels that you're dealing with here across the board. Remember, like I said, it does not take into consideration or it doesn't adjust for gain as well as the area that's being read. Okay, keep that in mind. But it is slightly better on the X-T2 side, which I thought was kind of strange But anyways, let's move into the next frame. So here you can see the X-T3 compared to the Nikon Z7. Once again, look at the noise profiles. We cannot compare cameras here, but look at how the gain is set up. By looking at this step, it's my understanding as soon as you see a step, it is a different circuit. So you have a circuit, for example, on the FujiFilm X-T3 that goes all the way up to, let's say, 640 ISO. And as soon as it changes over to 800 ISO, it switches the circuit. All right. Now we can see that switch happening on the Nikon Z7 right around, let's call it 320 ISO, where the circuit changes and it drops down that decibel, let's call it, or it drops down the gain on the ISO. So looking at the next frame, you can see that I've compared now the X-T3 with the Canon EOS R. Now, we're not really looking at the noise here, but I'm showing you the way the step works. We can see that big step on the X-T3 that happens right around 640, whereas with the Canon EOS R, there's more consistency. The noise profile is more consistent. Once you hit 400 ISO, it's consistent right all the way up to 51,000. There is a different way that they're doing their noise or their gain. It's more linear, let's say. So now in the fourth chart, you can see that I've added the X-T2, the X-T3, and also a Sony A7 Mark III. A lot of you guys are really interested in the Sony A7 Mark III, so I figured let's take a look at it. It definitely looks like it's a little bit better on the noise side, but look at that step. Look at that second circuit, right? They look very similar. It's almost like Fuji has the same circuitry as Sony does. So I'm like, well, let's go ahead and add a few more Sony cameras and see if there's anything that looks similar. So on this next frame, what I did was I added the X-T3, the Sony A7III, the Sony A7R2, as well as the A7R3. And look at this chart, guys. They're almost identical. I mean, if you check out other cameras, they don't look like this. It's almost like the internals of the Fujifilm cameras are the same as the Sony cameras. They've either duplicated their gain profile or they're using the same circuitry and just moving it around a little bit. I don't know, but this is definitely interesting, right? I think it's fascinating. Now in this last frame, I left everything alone, but I added one additional camera. And the camera that I added was the Sony A7S, because we know that it's usually amazing at low light. Now look at that chart. It seems that from, let's say, 100 all the way up to 1600 is pretty much on par. But as soon as we hit 1600 with the A7S, it immediately drops. And look at that noise profile. It is lower than every other camera, and that makes sense. That's why we've always said that the Sony A7S line is just incredible when it comes to noise. It does such a really great job at lowering the amount of noise at high ISO. So it's a really great camera for low light situations, right? So anyways, guys, does this all make any much of a difference? How does this matter? How does this pertain? It doesn't. It doesn't. But I found it and I thought it was really interesting. I wanted to share it with you guys. So let's just use it as food for thought, all right? Just additional points to converse about in the comment area below this video. So let's get back to the question at hand. Should I buy a Fujifilm X-T2 or an X-T3 if I'm in the market for a mirrorless Fuji camera? Now, in my personal opinion, I think that this is a very hard choice, okay? Very hard choice. You've heard all of the specs, so I'm sure in your mind you have an answer already. For me, the most important thing that I really absolutely love with the X-T3 is number one, the tracking, the AF, the eye tracking, I think is phenomenal. And being so much quicker, I think it's really, really great. And also just video in general is better on that X-T3. And for me, that's very important. As far as IQ, I think they're pretty much on par. The X-T3 is going to give you a little bit sharper image. It's got an extra couple of megapixels that you can play with. And also it has a little bit better dynamic range. So the IQ is going to be a little bit better on the X-T3. But I would say nominal. Okay, if you're not going in there and pixel peeping and you're just using the camera for basic use, I think the X-T2 would be a great choice. So once again, it depends on what you are going to do with the camera. Look at those specs that we discussed. If there's nothing in that list that just blows your mind and says, I have to have that, okay, I would probably go X-T2. It's $500 less right now. And that extra $500, I personally would buy a really nice piece of Fujifilm glass, right? A good piece of glass is always more important than the body that you're using. Glass is so important. So that's my personal opinion. I want to know your thoughts. Let me know what you think about the Fujifilm X-T2 versus the X-T3 that's been going on. We've been talking about that. Which one would you buy? And also, what did you think about these charts? Very interesting. Don't forget to go visit this site. Like I said, I'm going to put that link at the bottom in the comment area or in the description so you can go visit it. Once again, it looks like the Sony camera and the Fuji camera, they have a very similar way of dealing with their gain or how their noise profiling is working or how their gain is working. And when they turn the knob up and when they turn it back to either really push that noise up or drop that noise way back down. So very, very similar. I would almost say that Fujifilm is using a Sony internal circuit, but they could just be doing a similar type of methodology. I really don't know. Anyways, guys, that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed the content. It was fun for me playing with all these charts and getting all this information. I hope, like I said, you enjoyed it. If you have, please throw me a big thumbs up. That would be stellar. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button so you can get all my content when it becomes available, and click the bell icon so when it is available, you will be notified of it. And finally, head over to my website, JCristina.com, where you can find all the photography tools I've invented for you and me over the years, and hopefully there's something there that you might like. And if there is, please pick it up and support me. I would appreciate it. That's it, guys. I'm out of here for yet another vlog. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.